Laura called me and she was like, hey, do you have a moment to talk? I was like, yeah. And like, by the way, this meeting was awesome. And she was like, I just got diagnosed with a brain tumor. And I was like, oh, it literally felt like everything stopped. And it sounds so cliche, I know. But there's no other way I can describe it. Like I remember looking around at the airport at everyone walking around and thinking like, how can you all just be going on like living life and moving on like nothing just happened? Like, do you not know that this like big bombshell was just dropped?
Welcome to Season 2 of Behind the Business. I'm your host, Faheem Savja. Every episode, we go beyond the business plans and discover the real life and untold stories of today's entrepreneurs. It's time for the people behind the business. Let's get into it. Hey there, just a quick note before we dive in. Alongside Behind the Business, I run a small consulting practice called Savja Advisory. We work with fintechs, founders, and financial institutions. Whether it's product strategy, partnerships, or business transitions, we're in the business of helping small businesses and those who serve them succeed. If that's you, check us out at savjaholdings.com/advisory. All right, back to your episode. Connie, thank you so much for coming on Behind the Business.
It's so nice to be here.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Of course. I couldn't not have you on the podcast because every morning when I wake up, I have all these 3Ship stuff on the counter.
That's like music to my ears.
Yeah, my wife loves it, and I also do love it. I do also use the First Light, especially on rough mornings when I need it.
Gotta get some depuffing, brightening magic under the eyes.
Exactly. No, so I'm very excited to chat with you. Thank you for being on. Why don't you tell me what 3Ships is, and then I definitely want to dive into your founder story.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me, Faheem. It's so nice to be here. So 3Ships is a natural skincare brand really focused on being the most effective, natural, accessibly priced skincare brand in the world. And we really started 3Ships because we were two 23-year-olds who couldn't afford high quality natural skincare. So I know you said you use First Light, but I don't know how familiar you are with the whole natural beauty industry, but it's really expensive. So I graduated from Queens, started working in marketing and sales, and I was introduced to my co-founder, Laura. And both of us bonded over how we both couldn't afford what was out there. Like brands were charging, and still are, charging hundreds of dollars for a full routine, which we think is absolutely ridiculous. So we thought about it, and we're like, okay, we could do something better. So we pulled together a savings, which at the time we each had like $2,000.
Yeah, fair enough.
So with $4,000, we started in my apartment kitchen. So we'd work our 9-to-5s, and then we'd meet up in the evenings and on weekends to make the products and sell at our local farmers markets and craft fairs.
No way. So this is while you're working, like full time. No way. How'd you balance that? Or did you not?
I don't even know what balance means, but I feel like it's a whole other combo. But it was like work 9-to-5s, and then Monday nights, Laura would come over to my place, which was like the manufacturing facility in quotes. So it's like jugs of coconut oil everywhere. And then on Wednesdays, we'd go over to her place, which was like the strategizing office, and we'd do like, I don't know, making the website on Shopify and thinking about our marketing strategy. And then on weekends, we'd sell at our farmers markets and craft fairs and get customer feedback. We had like a $300 laser printer that we would use for our labels because, again, we didn't have a big budget. We couldn't get custom labels or custom packaging. But it actually was a really big benefit because when customers would give us feedback at these craft fairs, we would go back home, change the label, and then reprint and go back to the market the next week and see what people thought. So it was like very, very bootstrapped in the beginning days.
For sure.
But today we're found in over 1,000 retail locations like Whole Foods, Credo Beauty, the Detox Market. It's been a really big journey. We have 26 SKUs, I believe now, or 24 to 26 SKUs, all within the facial skincare category, and 20 employees.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's been awesome to follow your journey, especially from the early days. And it's really interesting to me because a lot of people who are followers of this podcast, and a big reason why I created it in the first place is because I know that there are tons of people who are interested in doing their own thing, but they may be at a big accounting firm, they may be at a different corporate job, and leaving that is really difficult, right? I was going to ask, when those early days when you were splitting your 9-to-5 and founding this, what was that like leaving, the world of corporate accounting or other things that you were doing to be able to start something brand new?
Oh man. So I like essentially left 2 corporate jobs before I started 3 ships. So the first job that I had that you alluded to was in accounting at KPMG. I loved my internships there, but working full time, it's a whole other story.
I've heard.
And I'm someone who loves talking to people. And I remember when I was in audit, it was my first time where I was like, oh, clients don't always want to talk to you because they think that you're catching them out on something that you audited. And I was like, this is definitely not for me. So I thought back to my time at Queen's and I was like, okay, what were the extracurricular courses that I really liked? And it was always things like negotiation, law, marketing, sales. And I'm like, you know what? Let me just take a leap and go into marketing and sales. And
no way.
For those who are listening who might want to move corporate jobs to like another job, might not necessarily be thinking of starting something new, but just aren't happy with where they are. Something that I thought about that helped me make that decision to quit KPMG was, even though it felt like I would be behind my peers, because I'm like, oh, I'm already 8 months into my 8 months, not even a big deal. But I was like, I'm 8 months into my corporate life. Like I'm going to be 8 months behind all my peers. And then I was like, or if you stay in this job for 5 years and you hate it and then you quit, you're 5 years, 8 months behind where you would have been. And I'm like, you know what? That actually gave me the confidence to make the decision to quit. I didn't even write the exams. Like I was like, I'm done. I'm done with accounting. I don't need the letters. Like,
you knew. You were like, this ain't for me.
I knew. Yeah. And luckily my parents are really supportive. They're like, okay, it seems like you really don't like this. And I didn't quit until I had another job. So I started working at Kimberly-Clark. And then during that time is when I would side hustle on what became 3 ships. And when we were balancing going back and forth, it was a lot of work, to answer your question. Like Laura and I would use our vacation days from our corporate jobs to make products in my kitchen. I remember when we eventually moved from my apartment kitchen to my parents' basement, and that became the manufacturing facility. So thank you, Mom and Dad. I remember there was a week where we took 5 days off and we used that 5 days to make 15,000 serums by hand. So we were mixing in like Home Depot buckets.
No way.
Yeah. And then we would like hand label the bottles. We put them into boxes that we hand like made, and then put them into boxes and then ship them off to the buyer. And it was like considered such a big PO for us back then.
Of course.
And so by the end of that week, like everyone's wrists were hurting, like backs were aching, but we made, I don't know, maybe like 50,000. Like I don't even remember what the PO was. So all this to say, like that was our balance back then. There were times where I would see my friends out on the patios and they'd be like, do you want to hang out? And I'm like, I can't, because this is the only time I have to work on our business cards or like make the products. And then when we made the decision to quit our corporate jobs back then to go full time with 3 ships, the way we made that decision is we told ourselves, once we have enough in our bank accounts for 6 months of runway of not paying ourselves a salary, then we'll quit. So we added up all our expenses.
Okay, cool.
So like my rent, my utilities, my meals and entertainment, which was very small, and whatever else I needed to survive. Once I hit that number, that was when I was like, okay, we're going to quit. Because Laura and I knew that, you know, we were in jobs where we were doing well, honestly. And we knew that if we didn't have a hard deadline, we wouldn't feel comfortable to quit. So once we hit that 6-month mark, we quit. And the funny thing is, we actually ended up going a full year without paying ourselves a salary.
Way.
So we extended that budget by another 6 months.
Oh my God. Was the early days of packing those boxes using Home Depot, you know, containers, was it your parents also being there to like wrap things and label things? Were they part of that?
Yeah. And like behind every entrepreneur, there's really a support system. And I'm eternally grateful for my parents for being there from day one. So even when Laura and I were making products in my apartment and my parents weren't necessarily involved in the day-to-day, my mom was coming by and dropping off food for me to eat just because she knew I didn't have the time or the money to really like afford food. And then once we went full-time, once we moved from my apartment kitchen to my parents' basement, that's really when my parents became like our de facto first unpaid employees.
Oh my God.
So my dad was like our operations manager and my mom was like our chef / like warehouse worker.
So funny.
And we still have videos of those days where like I remember one of our first Black Fridays, my mom was holding like a sheet of orders like printed out, and then we were running around the basement being like, 1 glow serum and 2 radiance creams, and like we're putting them in like baskets, and my dad was printing out the shipping labels, and then we were putting them in big plastic garbage bags. And then my dad would drive those garbage bags to like the drop-off center. And they knew him so well because he would go so often. And then when we would stay over, like Laura and I would sleep over at my parents' house. And so we'd work during the day and or into the night making products. And then we'd sleep over and then my mom would make all the meals. So even like now, I'm sure my parents are still involved in many ways. I mean, my dad loves sharing news of 3 ships with his friends. And like when he goes on business trips overseas, he'll be like, have you thought of this? Or he's always taking photos of like Sephora displays in like Asia and like Australia. And I'm like, okay, good to know.
That's unreal, man. You're right. You nailed it when you said behind every entrepreneur, there is a true support system, whether it's a spouse, whether it's family, whether it's friends, like you really, really need that. Tell me a bit more about, your co-founder relationship as well. I know more recently, there was an article in the Globe and Mail that you all were featured in, and it was about the co-founder relationship why that really matters and what it is that you need in that relationship to make it work. How did you meet Laura? What's it been like working with her and having a co-founder relationship?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest blessings, honestly, having a co-founder. So maybe to like go back in time, the way that we were introduced back in 2017 is my friend Brandon, who went to middle school with me, remembered that in grade 5, I used to make my own skincare.
Grade 5?
Yeah, in grade 5, I was so weird. But he was like...
You were destined to do this.
Yeah, clearly. But I never thought it would be a full-time thing. And I would just run home from school and then I would mix up like mashed bananas, green tea, egg white, and honey. Yeah, and oats for sensitive skin. And my mom taught me all of this. And I would make my own face mask and I'd walk home from school with him because he was my neighbor. And I'd be like, okay, today I'm going to use this formula and see how this feels.
No way.
And then he went to university and studied chemical engineering with Laura. And during university in 4th year, she was telling him like, hey, I kind of want to think of making my own natural makeup remover because she realized that coconut oil was really good for removing waterproof makeup. And she was like, do you know anyone that I can talk to? And he was like, you should talk to my friend Connie. She's like the crazy girl from grade 5 that would make her own skincare. And so we met up for what was meant to be like a 30-minute dinner, just so she could show me her minimum viable product. And it was like a brown jar with like cotton rounds that she hand soaked with oils from Whole Foods.
Okay.
And we just like hit it off right away. We call it our co-founder first date.
Yeah.
So we ended up staying there for 3.5 hours. We moved from the restaurant to the Starbucks across the street because the restaurant kicked us out because we spent too long. And during that first meeting, we talked about like our Myers-Briggs personality types, our life values, how we were raised, our skills and interests. And we realized we're complete opposites in terms of personality types and skill sets.
Which is a good thing.
So good. And like whenever people talk to me about co-founders and advice for finding a co-founder, I know it's really tempting to become co-founders with your best friend, and that can work sometimes.
Sure.
But more often than not, being a co-founder with someone that's actually a stranger and someone that has complete opposite interests to you is much better because then you don't have 2 people doing the same thing and you don't have as many blind spots. So in that first meeting, we realized I'm super extroverted. I love marketing and sales on the front end. Laura, being a chemical engineer, is very process driven, loves the back end, super great at analytics and numbers, which you might remember I quit accounting. And so by the end of that meeting, she was like, do you want to just be my co-founder on this? And I knew right away, like it just like was meant to be. And so, that night we got started. And then the next day we transferred our $4,000 into a BMO bank account and we got started.
No way.
Yeah.
That night.
Yeah. Like, well, the next day we transferred because it was closed. But
if it wasn't closed.
We would have marched over there. And co-founder tips, like so many pieces of advice. I think one of the most important things is communication. It's really like a marriage. In many ways, I see her and interact with her more than I do with my husband because we're both like working separately versus Laura and I work together at the office.
Right.
And in the beginning days, when you first meet someone who's your co-founder, it could be really hard to like understand where they're coming from, especially if they're really different from you. So for example, in the beginning days, I would use a lot of exclamation marks and emojis, and I was like very expressive via text message, like when we were coordinating a meetup to make products, as an example. Versus Laura, she's very like stoic via text, very like period, full stop. And I know, I was like, oh my God, what did I do? And so in the beginning days, I was like, oh my God, did I piss her off? And then on her end, she was like, why is she so happy all the time? And what really helped with that was writing a user guide. Have you written one before?
No. Okay. Tell me more.
So you know how like when you get a new piece of technology, like a new vacuum cleaner, you get a manual to teach you how to use it.
Yeah.
When you meet someone for the first time, especially in a work setting, you don't know how they like to operate. You don't know how they like to give and receive feedback. You don't know their like most energetic times to work during the day, their managerial styles, things like that. And so when you write a multi-page document that outlines all of this, it gives insight to the other person receiving it into how to work with you.
No way.
I think it's like one of the best things that we've ever done. And I can't take credit for the idea. I saw it online somewhere. But ever since that point, after her and I wrote our user guides, every new hire on the team writes their own and also reads everyone's user guides in our company.
No
and
way.
so you have like a quick snapshot into how people like to work together. And I really think that's helped a lot in understanding different personality types, especially in a remote first workplace where you don't have all the context and tone of and body language of being in person. So learning to communicate with each other is really important, and having trust is really important too.
When did you write that user guide?
Oh, that was like 2018 maybe.
Okay, so still very early on.
Oh, and it's a living document too, so that's a good point. So I edit mine maybe every 8 to 12 months.
Gotcha.
And like the first line of my user guide says this is a living document, so I like update it regularly. And when I look back at some old versions, I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely not the same person.
I mean, you change, right? And this is so interesting because you're not only changing as a person, but you're changing as a founder, and you're changing as maybe as a spouse.
Like your priorities change.
Exactly. So, going back to you early innings, like, did you always have an inclination that you were going to do something entrepreneurial? And maybe you did because you were that grade 5 student who was making concoctions at home. Or was it something that you realized over time?
It's funny that you ask because I feel like the universe whispers to you, but you need to be aware and like open to it. And when I was younger, I definitely did my own things, like starting with like garage sales, where my dad's in cookware sales. And I mean, even before garage sales, I would go with my dad on his business trips because he sells cookware, and he would bring me to places like Brazil and Germany.
No way.
Like starting at the age of 6. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. Like seeing him sell to clients and understanding like, oh, in Brazil, he would package his cookware in bigger boxes, even though the cookware was the same size as what you'd see in North America. And it was because people associate bigger boxes with bigger value versus in like Europe, people want like more like sleek packaging. And I was like, this is so cool. It's the same product, but you're marketing it in different ways. And then I would like sell any excess cookware he had from his samples at his showroom, like as in the garage sale. And people were like, you're really good at this. And I'm like, I'm just 7 years old. And then when I was in high school, I did the Junior Achievements program. Are you familiar with it?
I am. I was a Junior Achievement mentor at some point.
Oh, really? That's so cool. It was the best. And I remember the day that they came in grade 9 to do a talk at my school. And I was like, this seems really interesting. So I actually ended up doing for all 4 years of high school and won some competition with them in the end. And I remember like falling in love with the idea of making my own thing and like being my own boss. And I also have to say, seeing my dad as an entrepreneur also showed me the downside of being an entrepreneur. Right?
All right.
Right? Because like, for example, I was seeing him not being able to turn off from work. Like he would, because like even though he had an office, he would still be working 24/7.
Of course.
And even with that, I still wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I feel like I went into things with my eyes wide open of like, there's good things and there's bad things. There's a quote that I like that goes, as an entrepreneur, you can take off any Friday, you just don't know which one yet. And I'm like, I don't know if you relate to that, but
absolutely.
Super relatable for me at least. And I saw that with my dad.
I think a lot of founders who are comfortable going into entrepreneurship are comfortable because they've seen someone else do it, right? Especially like a parent. So they can get comfortable with the idea. But have you changed your style now that you've seen how your dad's operated? And if you have, like, what is it that you do differently from him?
That's a really good question. I feel like when I was younger and I would see my dad was working 24/7. And I remember one time, sorry dad if you end up listening to this, but we had a big fight when I was in high school. Yeah, no way. Who would have thought? But yeah, no, we had a really big fight because I was like, mom knows all my friends and where they're going for their birthdays and all these things. You don't know anything about Angela. And then he was like, I'm working to provide like food for the table, you idiot. Oh my God. I was like, true. But I noticed in that moment, I was like, oh, I wish that he would turn off at maybe 8 p.m. so we could have like proper conversation around the dinner table.
Sure.
But the funny and ironic thing is when Laura and I first started our company, especially when it was just the two of us working on it for the first like close to 5 years, I want to say, I was working around the clock because there's no one else that you can pass off the work to. Whatever input you put in is the output that comes out. Like there's no one else you can rely on. But now that we're like maybe 8 years into the journey, I've definitely developed more like boundaries and a little more balance.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I think I have varied the way that my style of entrepreneurship from what I observed from my dad. But I still believe a lot in hustle and hard work. I feel like hustle has a really bad rep and you do need to put in the work.
Yeah.
Now that we're 8 years into the journey, finally I have people I can delegate things to. But in the beginning, I was not using terms like boundaries and like all that. I was like, just get it done. Make 15,000 products. Let's go.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It's funny to see that though, because you're probably making comparisons as things are coming up, right? Have there been like challenges that you've come to that you're like, oh man, this reminds me of exactly, when my dad went through this or when I went through this before, like these big monumental changes that you have to go through in your business?
I feel like I didn't get to see as much of the hardships. Like my dad would kind of shelter us from a lot of that. All I saw a lot of the times was that he was gone. Like he would be on business trips. Like he would go multiple times a month and he'd be away versus like now when we have conversations, some of the same things that impact him will impact us. Like for example, he'll say like, oh, these tariffs, and I'm like, yeah, because he has factories in Asia and we can talk about that. Or we're talking about like, the value of the Canadian dollar and like that impacts things. So like, I feel like those are more of the conversations we can have now, but I mean, we could dive into a bunch of challenges that Laura and I have been through because there have been many.
Yeah. There's one that I really want to talk about because it was when you were scaling and you were finally getting really good traction and you had this big meeting with Target.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to hear more about that.
Oh, my gosh. I don't know where you read this online, but yeah, that was probably one of the best days of my life and probably the worst day of my life.
Okay.
So this was November 2019. I remember I had found the Target buyer's info somewhere online and then tracked him down at a trade show. Ended up waiting outside the men's room for him to leave the room because I was like, I know what he looks like on LinkedIn. And then I was like, hey, do you want to come by our booth? And then we ended up having a conversation. He's like, okay, come to the Target headquarters in Minneapolis and pitch in November. I was like, this is sweet. And also,
this is happening.
It was happening. Also, like, I didn't know anything really about Target back then. All I knew about Target was it's where my friends went to shop and they would go in for one thing and leave with like 100 things.
For sure.
Which will come more into the story later. So I was like, oh, perfect fit to discover a new natural skincare brand. So went to the Target office, pitched, and it was incredible. And later I would find out that we got in. I remember leaving the office. I was at the airport sitting and I remember treating myself to like a burger. And then Laura called me and she was like, hey, do you have a moment to talk? I was like, yeah. And like, by the way, this meeting was awesome. And she was like, I just got diagnosed with a brain tumor. And I was like, oh, it literally felt like everything stopped. And it sounds so cliche, I know. But there's no other way I can describe it. Like I remember looking around at the airport at everyone walking around and thinking like, how can you all just be going on like living life and moving on like nothing just happened? Like, do you not know that this like big bombshell was just dropped? And then that's like, again, the highs and the lows. And she was like, we can talk more about it when you're back, but I'm going to need at least a week to just process this. And I'm like, of course. And keep in mind, it was just the two of us in the business back then.
Wow.
And so for that week, I was operating under like I don't really know what's going to happen here. We didn't know even what like the procedure was going to look like. Sure. She ended up having a 10-hour brain surgery the week before the COVID lockdown.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Which honestly, in retrospect, was a huge like saving grace, because had her surgery been postponed, it probably would have been postponed for a really long time, because brain surgeries were somehow deemed as elective surgeries, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
So we really think like everything worked out in a way, and it was a silver lining because she had months to just slow down and recover. But yeah, that was like probably the hardest day and best day in one of the ways.
Yeah.
And then after that, she recovered after her surgery. She had to relearn how to walk, how to tell time. Yeah. She was doing things like sleeping in her bed backwards. Like she would sleep with her feet on her pillow and her head where her feet usually go, like things that you don't realize are connected in your brain and all the different neural pathways. She had to reconnect. And she would read a magazine and not know where to start. Like it was really interesting to see her pick things back up again. But Laura's one of the smartest people I know, and she recovered super fast. And then we actually rebranded to 3 Ships that year, something we were working on. We were on Dragon's Den a few months after that. And then we ended up landing a bunch of our large retail accounts a few months after that. So yeah, it's again, highs and lows.
For sure. Yeah. In that moment when you were thinking, I don't know what's going to happen with the business, like how, when you figured out that you'll be doing this by yourself for a little while, like how did you react? Like, did you just take it day by day, or like what did you do?
I remember I got back home late that night, and I don't think I was living even with my then boyfriend, now husband. I think I was like alone, and he came over and I was like, oh my God, I was like crying. And the next day, I remember we had to make a bunch of products by hand for a big retail order. My parents ended up staying up with me till 3 a.m. And then I had to get up at 8 a.m., finish the products, go back downtown for a pitch, because we had to pitch for this thing called the Forum. And I did it solo and like had to be like super upbeat and everything.
And pretend like nothing happened.
Like nothing happened. And then after that, I felt like I had a little bit of time to think. So during that time, I did some research on like, what do you do when a friend is diagnosed with brain cancer? Because keep in mind, we weren't just co-founders, we were like best friends by this point. So it was really tricky to navigate how to approach her as a co-founder and a best friend. So I don't think I did it perfectly, but I tried to be there for her, like got some books for her, cooked for her. And then when she was ready to get back into things, I asked her, I was like, are you sure you want to? And she's like, honestly, I need a distraction. And something that I really credit to Laura is she says, sometimes when people are diagnosed with something, they take one of 2 paths. One is they let it become their identity, and then they say, woe is me. And on the other hand, of course, you can still feel bad for yourself, but you can say, what am I going to do with this? And for her, she wants to be a champion for people who have had brain tumor diagnoses or some other serious health concern, and show people you can still go on to do amazing things and be on Forbes 30 under 30 and do all the things. So yeah, this weekend we're going to do a brain tumor walk in Mississauga with the full team to raise money for charity.
That's awesome. It's wild to see that transition though, because I do remember watching the Dragon's Den episode, and I would have never have imagined that she and you both went through that, right? And that after that Dragon's Den episode, you got an offer too, and it was crazy.
3 offers.
Yeah, that's right. You got 3 offers, and then you went with Jim in the episode. What was that process like? And you know, would you recommend someone going through that?
Yes. So for your listeners, if you do have a newer company and you're wanting to get more awareness, even if you don't want to take funding from a Dragon, I 100% recommend you to audition and try to get on the show. Just because the awareness that you get across Canada, especially, is so high, and you can repurpose the clips for ads, which is great, even though I don't know if you're supposed to. But the process, so you first audition to some producers, and then after you audition, they'll tell you if you got in to do the actual filming in the Den. And I think it's maybe around, I think back then it was like around 80 or 100 companies that would actually get into the Den, but they don't actually put all of those tapings onto the show.
Oh, no way.
So what would really suck is if you went into the Den, you pitched, maybe you get an offer and you don't go on TV. And so what we did to prepare is we had conversations with, I think, around 8 to 10 founders that had been on Dragon's Den.
Got it.
And we asked them questions like, how would you prepare? What did you do? What would you recommend? And people give us advice like smile the entire time, because they can edit and splice the clips to make it look like you reacted to something they said. So if you're like looking like upset, and then, you know, they'll take that clip and they'll put it after them saying like, I'm not going to invest in you. And you're like,
That seems so shady, but okay.
Yeah. And so we're like trying our best to smile the whole time. People were saying you should have some sort of really compelling 1-minute pitch in the beginning. So something big and TV worthy, because it's reality TV. So like big props. And Laura and I talked about her brain tumor diagnosis. And then the night before, because it was during COVID, last minute our hair and makeup got canceled, and like Laura and I, we're skincare people, we're not hair and makeup people, especially not TV hair and makeup.
Fair enough.
And so we ran to Shoppers that night at like 9 p.m, bought all the waterproof makeup we could find, and like started testing makeup looks on ourselves. And then we did it ourselves the next day, and you're in the back room for hours. So we were supposed to go on at like 10 a.m, and they didn't let us in the den until like 3, because they just kept bumping us back because there were other priorities. Like there was someone with a kid in her pitch, and obviously like, you know, kids take precedence, or a dog was there and like the dog was getting antsy. So like they went first, like who's going to put on like 2 25-year-olds, like, or maybe we were 26 at the time. And then you're in the den for like 45 minutes to an hour, and they edit it down to 6 to 7 minutes. But they're actually super nice, like really nice people. I remember they made us walk in and say our names and our valuation, I think. And then they said, cut. And then you're like, oh, and they make you re-walk in because they want to have 2 clips of you walking just in case one isn't great. And I remember just thinking like, don't slip. Because that would make it on TV.
For sure.
And then there was one part where Laura and I were in the side room whispering to each other, like reviewing offers, which you didn't see on the segment. And we were like, we don't know which one to take. And then we heard this like voice come out of the wall, and it was like, talk louder. We were like, what the heck? And we saw a cameraman with his camera in a hole in the wall. And he was like, oh, we need to be able to hear you on camera, but don't worry, like the dragons can't hear you. So we're like, okay. And we started like talking louder. So it's like very reality TV. And then we accepted Jim's offer. And then after the show, we actually reviewed it, and we were considering it, but we ended up not taking it because some of our advisors had told us that was a royalty structure. And I think it was for 5 years maybe. And people were saying, if you do end up fundraising, then investors might think like, okay, so 2% of my money is just going to go to someone else for 5 years. And instead what we did is we took the momentum of Dragon's Den and raised our own pre-seed round. So we raised 1.4 million in 2 weeks on much better terms.
Unreal.
But yeah, I actually ended up running into Jim and his wife at Soho House like maybe 3 years later. They were having breakfast, and I was like, okay, I got to go up to them. So I just went up. I'm like, thank you so much for the opportunity, and like it was so wonderful to meet you. And they were like the most humble people ever. His wife was actually, oh, you're the skincare brand, right? And they were so happy for our success. And yeah, they're really great people.
No ill will for not taking the deal.
And I'm like, hey, who knows? Maybe one day.
That's awesome. That kind of like story is wild, because I don't think people really see the, you know, what goes into all of that, right?
And also, I think a lot of people could utilize Dragon's Den in a bigger way. So, for example, like once we found out that our episode was airing, which we only had 1 week notice, I think. We put on a viewing party, but also we wrote a blog post about like using the term Dragon's Den as much as we could to get better SEO. And so if someone searched 3 Ships after watching it, our website would hopefully be first. And we also talked about the whole experience. So if anyone else is watching and wanted to know how to get on the show, we were trying our best to share our insights with them.
That's awesome.
And then after that, what did we do? We also redirected our friends to like the CBC link. And I think so many people end up watching it that they picked our episode to be one of the few on all Air Canada flights for a year. Then we got even more exposure. Unreal. So for a year, people were just watching us on
in the air.
Yeah, in the air. And one of our team members saw someone sitting next to her watching. She was like, oh my God, I know those people.
That's hilarious. That's awesome. You know, as much as the Dragon's Den experience was probably a lot of fun and getting offers was even better, I have like a really kind of probably tough question. When you're fundraising, or when you're speaking to people about the brand, whether it's Dragon's Den or, you know, out in the world of fundraising, does age become a factor? Do people worry about, oh, these guys are in their 20s, or they don't have enough experience? Do you have to deal with that as a founder?
Oh, yeah. And not just age, but gender. I know, like, it sucks to have to bring up, but I mean, when Laura and I first fundraised, I think we were 26, maybe 27. And we had no idea what we were doing. So that part, I understand if people were like, okay, we're not going to really take these girls seriously.
Sure.
But even before fundraising, when we were trying to find our first manufacturer, I remember Laura would go into meetings and sometimes they wouldn't even bring someone like VP or higher to the meeting because they're like, who is this 24-year-old woman?
Wow.
And so Laura used that to her advantage. And she's like, okay, well, if someone's not going to take the time to bring a VP, I'm not going to work with you.
Yeah.
And so the person who ended up bringing their head of sales and like someone else senior in the team, they're actually who we end up going with and staying with since then. And I remember we were at a trade show once and we were exhibiting and like trying to sell to buyers and people were like, oh, can we talk to the founders? So like these things happen, but it's okay because it's the reality of the world. And I think now that Laura and I are older, we're really trying our best to support other young female entrepreneurs because we know what it's like. So that's why we try our best to mentor other women. But even more fundraising, going back to your original question, I just can't even count the number of times white older male investor would be like, okay, well, like I'll give your products to my wife to try and we'll see if she ends up liking it. And like, we're like, yeah, but you have skin too. You can try it because like they're the ones who are investing. Or they'd be like, like you're not experienced enough, or like, you know, you don't have beauty connections or beauty experience, because neither Laura and I did. And every time that happened, honestly, Laura and I are pretty tenacious people, and we're just like, okay, fine. Like, well, like we would always end it very politely and be like, okay, well, like if not you, then, you know, do you happen to have 3 other people you'd be open to introducing us to?
Okay, nice.
So every no, we'd take at least 3 intros. Nice. And also in the back of our mind, we'd be like, okay, like this is good fuel for us to show other people like we got this. And then another thing we did is we applied to as many awards as we could to get some of that recognition. So like Forbes 30 Under 30, EY Entrepreneur of the Year, like these things add up, and RBC Canadian Women Entrepreneur of the Year. And once we had a few of those credentials, it made those conversations a little bit easier. Yeah,
because you establish credibility, even though ideally you'd be getting that up front, but these awards mean a lot more when they're visible and they're public.
Totally. And like, I don't want to hate on the investors too, because even when we were applying for the awards, I remember talking to the EY person and I'm like, okay, we want to apply for EY Entrepreneur of the Year. And this is, you know, a couple years into the business where we had established ourselves and we're doing a couple million in sales. And she was like, I think it's a little too early for you guys. And I was like, it's okay, I'm still going to apply. And she's like, okay, cool. And then she was the one who called me to tell us that we were finalists. And she was like, I'm so glad you didn't take my advice. And then when we ended up winning, she called me again and was like, I am so glad you didn't take my advice.
Seriously? Oh my God.
So it's like, you got to have the belief in yourself because no one else will believe in you more than you will.
For sure. It's hard to do that though, right? I do think, you know, a lot of founders get into this sticky situation where they're their own biggest critics, right? Whether you call it imposter syndrome or something else, you are so hard on yourself, right? Most founders are. Have you experienced that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think the number of times I've written imposter syndrome in my journal is like great pages and pages. I remember when Laura and I first started and we were in my kitchen and we were looking at brands that we really admired, ones that were carried on the shelves of Sephora and Ulta. One thing that we did is we were like, okay, well, these brands are so much further ahead than us. And we were like, we feel the comparison, we feel the imposter syndrome. So I remember one of the brands, we ended up finding their original Etsy store. And I don't know how we did it, but we like edited the URL because we saw that the most recent orders, the URL ended in like, let's just say like 1004. And we're like, okay, so maybe if we edit the URL to like -01 or something, we can see what their first orders look like. And we could actually do that. I don't know if Etsy's the same now, but essentially what we did is we went back in time and we saw what their first products looked like. And ours looked better than their you know, brown craft paper wrapped skincare. And that showed us like, hey, you can start from that and then, you know, start getting your own labels and then start having screen printed bottles and then end up on the shelves of Sephora. You don't start from like that point.
You don't start at Sephora.
Yeah, you don't start at Sephora unless you're like a celebrity. But that really helped us with imposter syndrome because we're like, okay, everyone starts somewhere. Another thing that I do for imposter syndrome is I have a Google Drive folder in my personal Google Drive just called My Personal Wins. And anytime something happens that I can screenshot or like write a note about, I'll save it in the folder. So when we landed our first retailer, it was a screenshot. And then and I title it with the year and the month just so I can remember like when it was. was and sort it chronologically. And it could be small things like a buyer saying like, oh, like you're one of our favorite brands to work with. And what's really cool is it forces you in the moment to recognize like, oh, like I'm actually doing a good job, because then I'll remember like I want to save this. And then the second benefit is sometimes when I'm feeling down, I'll just go through that folder and I'll be like, whoa, I remember I screenshotted when our team was 4 people.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And then now like the screenshots are like 20 plus like a few part-timers. And I'm like, this is cool. And I wonder what it's going to be like in 3 years.
For sure.
And that really helps with imposter syndrome.
It's been really cool to see you guys on social media do the, 8 years ago or 5 years ago comparisons and look back, because I think you guys do a really good job of sharing what it's actually like, right? Not a lot of founders do that. And a lot of founders will just show you what they want you to see, but you show them the reality and you show your customers the reality. What's being out there as a founder? And there's this term out there now, like a founder influencer as well. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I can feel you cringe. What's that been like?
I never wanted, nor do I want to be an influencer.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because right before I got here, my team messaged me and they're like, we need you to film this ad. And they gave me like a full script, and like it was super embarrassing. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe we're putting media dollars behind this. And I had to like eat a banana, and like it's like so weird. Like they were just telling me like the weirdest prompts to do. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be out there in the world and thousands of people are going to see this. And like on a more micro level, needing to like show the behind the scenes of like, oh, this is what my day looks like, and these are the hardships. Like it's kind of hard for me personally to show that, because I am more of a private person. But at the same time, I see the benefit in being open about what you're doing, and those brands tend to grow faster too, because and I understand it, because like as a consumer, I would much rather support a brand where I know or I feel like I know the founder.
Absolutely.
And even now, like not only am I trying to support more Canadian brands because of everything going on, but also when I'm shopping at Sephora and I see the founder face, I'm like, this is really cool to know that I'm supporting her or supporting him, as opposed to like a L'Oreal or a Unilever where there's a brand manager that like is running, the ad dollars, and they don't really care maybe about the brand. So I think that founders now, for those listening, you should probably get comfortable with being behind the scenes more. And if I could do something over again, I would have taken more content in the beginning days.
No way.
Because we recycle through the same photos and videos from those beginning days of like Laura mixing, toner in a stainless steel bowl in my apartment. And like, there's a photo of us, like I'm wearing a Raptors shirt and like, we're like making cotton rounds and like we look exhausted. Oh my God, the garage one has been shown many times. That was like the day we moved out from my parents' house into our own little warehouse. And that was a crazy day. And so, I wish we had more content like that, because I think back then I was really embarrassed, to be honest. And I felt ashamed to show this side, especially since all my friends were advancing up their corporate ladders. And I was like, what am I doing? 23, quit my job, I have no salary, making products in my kitchen and like slipping on coconut oil everywhere. But if I could do it over again, and for those listening, that content, A, it's like really nice to look back on, and B, it's really good for ads.
Yeah, of course.
Great for TikTok.
Yeah.
I would get comfortable with being an influencer.
Yeah, it's tough though, right? I mean, it's really hard. I sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I have to like promote the podcast and promote this type of work, and you kind of have to get over it a little bit, only because it increases connectivity with your end user, right? And I think that's really, really, really important, especially right now where there's so many brands competing for the same dollar.
Totally.
So speaking of the next dollar for you, what does the next few years look like for Three Ships?
So we have a really exciting marketing campaign happening this summer for our Hero SKU. So we're going to be doing some pop-ups all over Canada. It's going to be like our biggest brand marketing activation ever. Because historically we've spent more on growth and like bottom of funnel because we want to get a return. But now finally we're at the scale where we're like, okay, let's invest more in brand. So I'm really excited for that. We have some cool new products launching this year. Hopefully having an SPF launch within the next few years.
Nice.
Our standards for natural are so strict that like we found found a formula that's 95% natural.
Okay.
And we're like, we can't do this. So we need to have it be 100% natural with no white cast. Cool. So that's like one of the hardest products that we've ever had to formulate.
For sure.
In the next couple of years, I can see us expanding into other beauty categories, like maybe body care, because body care is a very natural one to expand into from skincare. And then Laura and my goal from day one, when we were 23 in my kitchen, has always been to sell the company. The most successful indie brands are the ones that end up having a long-term home and like vertically integrate with the supply chain. And like, you know, brands like Estee Lauder can help you expand internationally, and they have like all the experience. So that's really the goal for us, is having one of those CPGs acquire us. So who knows, maybe in the next couple of years.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. And then looking back, you know, in the early days when you were in your kitchen, you know, you talked about experience and advice to founders, but like to yourself and to your mom, what would you say in that moment? And the reason why I mentioned your mom is because you talked about her a bunch here and there. You talked about your dad as well, but I do know that your skincare idea feels like came from her, right?
Oh, for sure. My mom's like the OG influencer in my life.
No
like,
way.
Yeah, she definitely was is very into holistic remedies and wellness. I think to my mom, I would say, because like my mom quit her job to raise my sister and me, and she had her own career. And I remember there were many times throughout school and like even after I graduated, she's like, I really hope that was for something, because she felt like she didn't have that.
Yeah.
And I tell her this all the time. I'm like, I wouldn't be doing this without you. Like not only for the inspiration for the skincare idea, but also like all the support throughout the years and taking care of us and like helping to make products. And like the grind was real. So it's like all worth it, hopefully, for her. And we hang out all the time. They just slept over at my house over the weekend. And then you said
to yourself.
To myself, like my 23-year-old self. Oh man. Oh, so many things. I think we were really naive in the beginning days. We thought we'd sell by the time we were 30. And at the time of this recording, I'm 31. So it did not happen. But I actually think being like optimistic and a little naive helps an entrepreneur. Yeah. Because if I knew how hard it was in the beginning days, I honestly don't know if I would do it. Yeah. And I know that sounds bad because you're supposed to be passionate and all, but it's really, really hard. Yeah. And like the number of times where I'm like lying awake in the middle of the night and being like, what am I doing? Or like trying to work through a problem, or like crying, or like just being so confused. If I had known that when I was 23, I don't know if I would have done it. So really? Yeah, because it's so hard. Like knowing that Laura's gonna have a brain tumor, knowing that COVID was gonna happen, supply chain issues, tariffs. Yeah. There's so many things we could talk about. So I'm glad I didn't know. And the other thing is, I think really learning to sell is super important. So when I was 23, I remember I felt so much imposter syndrome because all my friends at Queen's were graduating and working in like finance, consulting, banking. Of course. And I was like, let me quit, accounting, going to marketing and sales. And then let me quit that and be an entrepreneur. Oh my God. And I remember thinking like, am I just so dumb that I can't figure it out in the corporate world? Yeah. And I wish I could go back to that version of me and be like, actually, no, in 7 years, everyone's going to want to be an entrepreneur and like people will be inspired by you, and like just keep doing what you're doing. And learning to sell is really important. So that's something I would tell her, and also any other new entrepreneur out there. I think sales is a skill that especially female entrepreneurs don't really lean into that much. For sure. So learn to sell, keep being optimistic and naive and stupid. And it'll all work out. No, honestly, it will. And I think it's been really cool, as I mentioned, to follow your journey and to hopefully see where things go from here. Because there are a lot of times where folks do now look at you, my wife included, who's like, whoa, like they're doing really cool things and they're getting these awards and they're promoting something that they believe in. And kudos for that. You guys are killing it. Oh, thanks. Yeah. I mean, it's been a journey for sure. And I'm always happy to help anyone who's thinking of starting something or on their journey. My DMs are always open. My Instagram's just at It's Connie Lo, ITSCONNIELO. You can find us at 3 Ships Beauty. But I really, really love to support other entrepreneurs, especially young female entrepreneurs, because I know what it's like. And my favorite quote is a rising tide raises all ships. So hoping I can help as many people as I can, including with this podcast. Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's why we're doing the podcast. Yeah. That's why we're here. I got to use more 3 ships now for myself.
I mean, your skin looks great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. But I got to have my own 3 ships corner, not just my wife's.
My husband does now too.
Oh, no way. I steal my wife's stuff way too often.
He used to steal my stuff all the time, which is why I'm like, you need your own.
Connie, thank you so much for being on Behind the Business. Well, I would love to keep going. So we're going to have to have you on another episode.
All right, I'm down. Let's do it.
Awesome. Thanks again. Thank you for everyone tuning in on this episode of Behind the Business. My name is Faheem Sabja.
And my name's Connie Lo.
And hope to see you on the next episode of Behind the Business. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in on this episode of Behind the Business. If you enjoyed it, do me a favor, share it with someone who's on their own entrepreneurial journey or thinking about starting one. Also, follow, subscribe, and leave a review whenever you listen. Lastly, keep up with us on Instagram at BehindTheBiz_POD. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep building, and keep listening. This is Faheem Sabja, signing off from Behind the Business.